Good afternoon. It is the 1st of March 2023, and here are the latest news updates from across the continent of Africa. We start from, of course, Nigeria's update on the just concluded election, and the ruling party candidate Bola Tinubu was declared winner of Nigeria's presidential election early Wednesday, soon after thanked his supporters and appealed for his rivals who are already demanding a revote in Africa's most populous nation. The announcement by election officials overnight was likely to lead to a court challenge by the second and third highest finishers in the weekend vote, Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi. Abubakar also finished second in the last vote in 2019, then appealed those results before his lawsuit ultimately was dismissed. Tinubu's ruling All Progressive Congress Party urged the opposition to accept defeat on Tuesday and not cause trouble after they had demanded a revote, saying that delays in uploading election results had made room for irregularities. Tinubu received 37% of the vote of nearly 8.8 million, while main opposition candidate Abubakar won 29% with almost 7 million. And the third finisher, Obi, took 25% with about 6.1 million, according to the results announced on live television by the Independent National Electoral Commission. The president-elect thanked his supporters in the capital, Abuja, after his victory was announced, and struck a reconciliatory tone in a message directed to his political adversaries. And Nigeria's two main opposition parties have called for the annulment of what they have described as a sham election, denouncing the massive manipulation of the results. A partial count gave ruling party candidate and former Lagos State Governor Bola Tinubu a lead, and of course Saturday's vote was generally peaceful, although there was security incidents and logistical hitches, and following the delays that followed thereafter, the major failures in the electronic transfer of results, the opposition accused the ruling All Progressive Congress Party of fraud, and several observers have also expressed concerns about the transparency of the vote and the operational failure. And so we move on to other news. And in Mali, proposed changes to Mali's constitution will bolster the president's power and reduce the status of the French language. That's according to a revised draft of the document, which was handed to the country's transitional president, Colonel Assimi Goïta, on Monday. The proposed new constitution is a key element of the vast reform projected. It initiated to ensure a return to civilian rule following an election it says will be held on February 2024. While it is yet to be officially published, a copy seen by the AFP news agency says that the head of state, not the government, will determine the policies of the nation. If approved, the president will also be responsible for appointing and firing the prime minister and government ministers, and be empowered to dissolve the National Assembly. Proposing laws will be the prerogative of the President and the National Assembly, whereas this was previously the right of government and members of Parliament. A president will be elected for 5 years and be limited to 2 terms in office. And, I've missed that. And constitutional changes, one of a string of major institutional revamps launched by the military after it ousted Mali's last elected president in August 2020. While the new draft also describes carrying out a coup d'etat as an offense, of which there is no time limit for prosecution, those involved in the 2020 takeover will be covered by an amnesty. It's quite interesting, is it? Now, despite several political parties questioning the need for a new constitution, Goïta said the draft had been drawn up without any obstacle. Mali is one of the world's poorest and most volatile countries in the world, suffering a string of coups since gaining independence from France in 1960. It has been battling a security and political crisis since jihadist and separatist insurgencies broke out in the north of the country since 2012. We go to Libya, and the UN envoy for Libya, Abdoulaye Bathily, announced on Monday the launch of an initiative for the organization of presidential and legislative elections in the country this year. His panel will be responsible for facilitating the adoption of a legal framework and a roadmap associated with a timetable for the holding elections in 2023 and advancing a consensus around related issues such as security elections and the adoption of a code of conduct for candidates, he said. This mechanism will bring together all relevant Libyan actors, including representatives of political institutions, important figures, tribal leaders, civil society organizations, security actors, women, young people, as said the indicated emissary. Libya has been embroiled in a major political crisis since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi's regime in 2011. The country is undermined by divisions between East and West and by foreign interference. Two rival governments are now vying for power, one based in Tripoli and recognized by the United Nations, and the other in Sirte, which is the center, and east and parts of the south are de facto controlled by Marshal Khalifa Haftar. A dual presidential and legislative ballot, originally scheduled for December 2001 to stabilize the country, has been postponed indefinitely due to differences over the legal basis for the elections and the presence of the controversial candidates. And residents in the economic capital of the Ivory Coast reacted to the announcement of French President Emmanuel Macron that the French government will reduce the number of troops in Africa. He was speaking in Paris ahead of a four-nation tour of Central African countries from Wednesday as France seeks to counter growing Chinese and Russian influence in the region. Macron made the announcement on Monday of a noticeable reduction of French troop presence in Africa, where anti-French sentiment is running high in some former colonies. Macron is to visit Gabon for environmental summit, followed by Angola, then the Republic of Congo, and Congo-Brazzaville, and finally the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. Paris has fallen out with the new military authorities in Mali and Burkina Faso, withdrawing its troops from both former French colonies after years of helping authorities there battle jihadists. France still has thousands of troops in the wider Sahel region, including Niger and Chad, but is seeking to tone down its presence on the ground. Macron described this as a reorganization of French military presence rather than a withdrawal. And a French court on Tuesday dismissed a landmark case against Total Energies for a massive oil project in Uganda and Tanzania after several NGOs filed a suit to suspend the controversial project. It was the first case of its kind in France, and activists had hoped it would set a legal precedent to hold projects deemed harmful to the environment and human rights. 6 NGOs that filed the suit argued the development of the East African crude oil pipeline EACOP failed to adhere to duty of vigilance in 2017 law that compels companies to avoid grave harm to human rights, health, safety and the environment. The court on Tuesday ruled the case was inadmissible, saying the plaintiffs did not correctly follow court procedures against the French energy giant. The suit was brought by 2 French and 4 Ugandan NGOs, which accused Total Energies of taking land from more than 100,000 people without adequate compensation. They also say the company drilled wells in the biodiversity ridge with Murchison Falls National Park on the shores of Lake Albert. Friends of the Earth and Survival, the 2 French NGOs, and the Ugandan groups denied having substantially modified their submissions to the court. They only clarified them and consolidated their arguments with more than 200 documents of supporting evidence, said Juliette Renaud, a campaigner with the Friends of the Earth. The plaintiffs, which can appeal the decision, said they would speak to the affected communities about the next steps. And then the M23 rebels continued fighting in eastern DRC. Local sources said on Tuesday, the day they were due to begin withdrawing from their positions under a regional plan. On February 17th, the East African leaders urged all non-state armed groups to withdraw from territory they occupy in eastern Congo by March 30th. The withdrawal was intended to take place in 3 stages, with the initial phase to begin on February 28th. But M23 rebels continued advancing in the DRC's North Kivu province on Tuesday. On Monday, the Tutsi-led group seized the town of Mweso, about 100 kilometers west of the provincial capital Goma. Local civil society leader Alphonse Habib Mana told AFP on Tuesday that the M23 was in control of the town of 30,000 people. And Harrietta Ndage, a spokesperson for the APCLS, one of the militia fighting the M23, confirmed that rebels had captured Mweso. Clashes with M23 continued on Tuesday, about 30 west of Goma, a city of over 1 million people, according to a security official who declined to be named. M23 fighters also remained in their positions several dozen kilometers north of Goma. We go to Egypt, and 3 journalists from one of Egypt's last remaining independent media outlets are to be put on trial. The 3 women work for the liberal online newspaper Mada Masa. They are charged with offending legislators from the nation's Future Party, which strongly supports President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. If convicted, the journalists could face prison sentences of up to 2 years and hefty fines. Nation's Future disputes an article carried by the website last August, which reported that a state watchdog had accused its MPs of gross financial misconduct. The Egyptian authorities have tried to clamp down on Mada Masa at least twice before. The newspaper has struggled to keep its publishing license. And the U.S. has placed a bounty on the spokesperson of the militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab. It offered $5 million for information leading to the identification or location of Ali Mohammed Rage, also known as Ali Dere. He has been Al-Shabaab's chief spokesperson since May 2009 and is a senior leader of the group, the State Department said. Al-Shabaab militants have recently carried out several attacks in Somalia, despite government forces gaining ground in the areas previously under the group's control. And then, still in Somalia, but this time in Somaliland, Qatar, Somalia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom and the United States have expressed concern over fighting around disputed town in Somalia's north and breakaway region of Somaliland, where at least 34 people were killed in clashes in early February. Tension has risen between Somaliland and local clan forces in Las Kanud since the end of last year, and heavy fighting has broken out around the town, which straddles a key trade route. Fighting around the town erupted in early February after elders in 3 provinces of Somaliland, including Sul province, where Las Kanud is located, announced they wanted to rejoin Somalia and issued a statement pledging support for Somalia's federal government. Somaliland, a region of 4.5 million people, claimed independence from Somalia in 1991 and has been relatively stable. Somaliland's quest for a statehood has gone unrecognized, however, leaving it poor and isolated internationally, even though it prints its own currency, issues its own passports, and elects its own government. And the latest from Uganda, Ugandan musician Jose Chameleone, real name Joseph Mayanja, has issued an apology for kissing his brother on the lips while on stage during a concert performance on Friday in the capital, Kampala. It wasn't the first time the brothers kissed on stage, but recently there has been a sharp rise in anti-gay sentiments in the country, which calls for a crackdown on anything that promotes same-sex relations. Jose Chameleone's kiss with his musician brother saw an influential preacher registering a complaint with the Ugandan police against the pair. Okay, Ugandans have time. Now, the patron of Ugandan Musicians Association said he had reached out to Pastor Martin Semper with a view to withdraw the complaint against Jose Chameleone. Uganda's parliament on Tuesday gave an opposition MP permission to introduce an anti-homosexuality bill, which he said was meant to deal with recruitment, promotion and funding of activities related to same-sex relations. Gay relationships are illegal in Uganda, where they can be punished by up to life in prison for committing what the Constitution there terms unnatural offenses. Okay, so that is his brother. But anyway, so he had to apologize. All right, anyway, so we go back to the DRC, And a section of members of parliament from the conflict-hit North Kivu province in the Democratic Republic of Congo want President Felix Tshisekedi to consider engaging the M23 rebel group. In an open letter, the MP said a peaceful settlement will de-escalate the ongoing conflict in eastern DRC that has displaced hundreds of thousands in the past year. The legislators have demanded to be involved in peace initiatives seeking to resolve this security crisis in the country. They want humanitarian corridors, roads blocked in areas affected by conflict to be opened. In recent weeks, the M23 has captured villages and towns. They attempt to advance towards the regional capital in Goma. The group was scheduled to commence withdrawal from positions they occupied in recent offensives beginning Tuesday for a period of 1 month. It is not clear if the rebels have complied with the retreat, but of course, according to the earlier reports from the ground is that it has not retreated. Instead, M23 continues to gain new ground. And the civil society groups are holding protests in Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, against the visit by French President Emmanuel Macron that is scheduled for later this week. The protesters gathered outside the French embassy to accuse France of siding with neighboring Rwanda, which has been linked by the UN and US of sponsoring the M23 rebel group based in the eastern part of the country. Rwanda has repeatedly denied supporting the rebels. President Macron's visit is meant to deepen the Franco-Congolese relationship in the fields of education, health, research, culture, and defense. According to a statement from his office, Mr. Macron is making a 4-nation tour of Central African countries, starting with Gabon on Wednesday, which is today. And then we end our bulletin this afternoon from Ethiopia. Civil society and human rights groups have called on the UN to block efforts by the Ethiopian government to end an independent probe into crimes allegedly committed during a brutal civil war in the country's north. The more than 60 organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, in a letter written to the UN Human Rights Council member states, the organization said they were alarmed by plans by Addis Ababa to present a resolution that seeks to cut short a UN-mandated inquiry. Ethiopia has resisted the UN's International Commission on Human Rights experts on Ethiopia since its inception in 2021, calling it politically motivated, and had previously attempted to cut its funding. Last month, the country's Deputy Prime Minister Demeke Mekonnen urged the African Union to support Ethiopia to bid to terminate what he called the Commission unwarranted mandate. The civil society and rights organizations called this push by Addis Ababa unprecedented and that one that would set a dangerous precedent about avoiding international scrutiny. The ICHREE work is needed to ensure justice and accountability, particularly as trust in domestic institutions eroded and authorities continue to harass human rights defenders, the organizations say. Now, Ethiopia's civil war was marked by accusations of grave rights violations, including killing of unarmed civilians and use of rape as a weapon, some of which, according to the United Nations, could amount to war crimes. All warring parties have been accused of the crimes. A landmark peace deal was signed in November between the government and fighters of Tigray region and helped a return of relative peace and normality to northern Ethiopia. But there is still little to no signs of holding perpetrators accountable for alleged abuses. That is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Well, I'm not really surprised by this move by the Ethiopian government. Now it appears it wants to, the civil society and human rights groups there are accusing the Ethiopian government of wanting to block any channels that could necessitate any form of accountability, especially over the conflict that just ended in the northern part of the country. And because Ethiopia had written to the African Union to help it end or close down, Ethiopia has restated the U.S. International Commission on Human Rights experts on Ethiopia since its inception. It has resisted this office being in Ethiopia, and this office was formed in 2021, the war had already started, and the Ethiopian government is saying this office is politically motivated, and the government has also attempted to cut its funding before. Now, the civil society are saying that the government, the leadership of Ethiopia, is trying to avoid international scrutiny over what had happened in Ethiopia. I think some level of accountability, I've said that before numerous times, over that conflict, and I will repeat it again. Whatever happened there and the levels of human rights abuses that were recorded in Ethiopia, whether they were, formally recorded or not, but we do know that high levels of human rights abuses happen there. So there's no chance that the government of Ethiopia is just hoping that because the mediation process happened and there was a peace deal that was signed and things seems to have resumed going back to normal, that now everything else is just water under the bridge. Over 500,000 people died. We've been given different figures, and the level of destruction, the rapes that took place, a lot of things happened. Literally, a genocide was ongoing in Ethiopia. So somebody has to be accountable. That is not something you wish away. That is not something that you pray away. That is not something that you gloss over. That is something that left an ugly mark in the fabric of the Ethiopian community. And that is something that has to be addressed. It has to be addressed. Otherwise, if this government is not keen on working on mechanisms of accountability, you will have one part of the population being forced to move on and being forced to be okay with whatever happened. And these are things that shows up much later, years to come. You're postponing another war. You're postponing another conflict when what happened and no action seems to have been taken that looks like sort of brought justice to the people who felt were, unfairness was brought upon them, and they don't have any kind of recourse. You think these people are supposed to just heal? If you want to really reconcile and you want to truly heal and come together and reconcile within yourselves, Ethiopia, you cannot avoid the issue of justice. There cannot be peace without justice. Justice and peace go together. Justice, peace, healing. These things, you cannot divorce these things. They must work in tandem for you to find true healing, for you to truly have people settled. Bad things happen in Ethiopia. Human rights abuses happen in Ethiopia. So when the government is being accused of wanting to close all avenues that could possibly bring justice to the people who were wrong, that could possibly bring some level of accountability, then that is wrong, and this is something that African Union should not support. I will not be surprised if African Union chooses otherwise, but this is something that African Union should condemn even. I know our headquarters is in Ethiopia, but still, this is something that African Union should not support, and there should be any mechanism, any initiatives that are geared toward finding a lasting resolution, a lasting peace that supports mechanisms to do with accountability. That is something that the African Union should vouch for, should support. But anything that seeks to defeat the wills of justice should not be supporting that at all. And I'll be watching this story very, very closely and see. Well, we know that Nigeria has a new president now, president-elect, and President-elect Tinubu gave a speech earlier It's such a long speech, I'll not even, maybe I'll just read the first three paragraph of that speech. My fellow Nigerians, I'm profoundly humbled that you have elected me to serve as the 16th president of our beloved republic. This is a shining moment in the life of any man and affirmation of our democratic existence. From my heart, I say thank you. Whether you are batified, articulated, I think he's trying to be very poetic with his words. I think when you say articulated, that means if you're supported Atiku, and if you're supported, him, and if you are obedient, that is if you are a supporter of Obi, or if you are Kwankwasia, that is if you're supporting Kwankwaso, or have any other political affiliation, you voted for a better, more hopeful nation. And I thank you for your participation and dedication to our democracy. You decided to place your trust in the democratic vision of a Nigeria founded on shared prosperity and one nurtured by the ideas of unity. Justice, peace, and tolerance. Renewed hope has dawned in Nigeria. I will not go into the details. It's such a long letter, so you can find it online if you're interested to know what President-elect Atiku said there. But the conversation we are having earlier on our Twitter spaces is the voter turnout, which I think if you just added the figures of the votes, they don't even get to 24 million. They don't even get to 24 million. I know perhaps if you add the spoiled votes and all that, maybe it will get to not more than 25 million, basically. And this election, the number of registered voters were over 90 million. So this is something that should worry the people of Nigeria. And I was joking here the other day because I know a person like Peter Obi, a lot of young people really felt he sort of represented their aspirations and he carried their dreams, and perhaps they looked at him as the change that maybe was needed in Nigeria. And I joked here, not really joking, but I stated here that last time I was talking about this because he had pulled the young people. His messaging had really attracted the young people, and every now and then he was trending on Twitter. And I said, Twitter voters or Twitter trends most of times do not really translate to real votes on the ground. But we can't really say that right now because there has been some concerns that have been raised over how this election took place. There has been issues that even the observers from the Commonwealth, from the EU, have stated. The issue to do with the beavers, the bimodal voter accreditation system, that was quite inefficient in how it played a role in this year's Nigerian election. And the failure of these machines and all that and other factors that the disruption that we saw in several polling stations over. There's another station that an attack happened. So I was just wondering, because these are issues that former President Olusegun Obasanjo in his letter on the 27th, I think he raised, and he said, stop these elections. And areas where there was some disruption or things happen, those ballots should not be counted, and instead there should be perhaps a new election organized for these areas. So I don't know that if also these areas that we saw the disruption of the process take place, if at all the voting or the ballot counting in these areas was cancelled, and maybe the INEC is planning to have another election in those specific areas, or they've decided to just go ahead anyway and count everything regardless of what happened and just do whatever. So issues have been raised, and election management is a problem now that Nigeria must start dealing with moving forward. It was poorly managed. It was poorly handled. You could see. And so it's still too early. I don't know if the other parties from PDP or Labour Party or others because yesterday they held a press conference and they said they do not agree with this announcement that INEC was making. And so I don't know if they will be willing to go challenge these results in court. Atiku did that. They are the last elections, and of course it was thrown out. So I don't know if he will be willing again to go back to the courts and challenge Tinubu's win this time. So it's quite interesting, and I think a lot of, especially young people, feel not very happy right now. So, but you know, he was declared, and Nigeria's two opposition parties have called for the annulment of what they have described as a sham election, denouncing the massive manipulation of the results. That is the PDP and Labour Party, and they're saying they do not recognize these elections. But following the delays in the count and major failures in the electronic transfer of the results, the opposition accused the ruling All Progressive Congress Party of fraud. So, and these are the issues that also former President Obasanjo raised, and yesterday while we were talking about this, I think I gave you the response from President Buhari's office, and they said, Obasanjo is just trying to cause troubles. The elections went well, and there's nothing that could warrant such actions to be taken. So, I don't know how you feel about that election. I don't know how you voted, and how your candidate really performed. But the issue of voter apathy, I think, is quite acute. There could be several factors because in some areas insecurity was a real problem, but also overall, what is it that made majority of Nigerian voters not to feel motivated enough to want to participate in this very important exercise? That is, you can't have president-elect to just having won by 9% of the registered voters, just by 9%. He'll be leading the country by a mandate of 9% of the registered voters in Nigeria. 9%. Think about it. In a country where you have 93 million people registered, 93 point something, I was expecting that the elected person will have at least 30 million. At least that way you can walk with confidence and say 30 million of the Nigerian voters have given me the mandate. 8 point something million? What's going on? Why didn't people turn up to vote in Nigeria? Does it have to do with the recent issues around Naira? There has been a problem with that. But I was thinking, if that was the problem, then they would have voted against the APC, because it's the current government that seems to have brought in maybe the timing and all that of this new bill. So what really went on? So I think as we wait for the conversations, maybe by the end of today, the opposition would have held another press conference and maybe told us which way forward and what steps they intend to take now that the Independent National Electoral Commission of Nigeria has announced the new president-elect in Nigeria. And of course, APC party was very, very happy with that result. And so, Nigeria's president, President Buhari, has Nigeria's outgoing president, Muhammadu Buhari, hailed the victory of his party's presidential candidate, Bola Tinubu, saying that the people have spoken hours after the announcement of the results disputed by the opposition. So that is what President Buhari said just a few hours ago. And he said, I congratulate His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his victory. Elected by the people, he is the best person for the job. I will now work with him and his team to ensure a smooth transfer of power. Of course, they're buddies, right? Of course. And there is no doubt that the people's decision has been rendered in the results we are seeing today. He added, as the opposition contests the election and calls for its annulment, denouncing mercy fraud by the ruling party. Buhari is 80 years old, and he's retiring after serving 2 terms. And I don't know if Tinubu is likely to continue with what Buhari was doing, and he will charter his own path as far as his leadership is concerned. I think it's too early to talk about that right now, but that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.